Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Dad, have you ever made a mistake and needed to make it right? If you haven't, just turn this off now. We don't even want to hang out with you. If you're like,
You've
no,
arrived.
I just have never made a mistake. So if you're one of the dads who are like me and Lawson, and you've made mistakes, like repeatedly, and you have occasionally had to double back and make something right, then today's show is for you. Now, if you're the dad who has made mistakes and you've never gone back and made some of them right, today's show is especially for you, because we're going to show you some ways for how to do that, and we're going to show you some Bible verses that speak to that challenge for us dads. Lawson, are you ready for today, my friend?
I am as ready as I need to be. How about that?
That's code for I just came off another Zoom and I'm still thinking about that budget I've got to do.
No,
jerk at
not
the
at all.
office. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this one hits home.
Well, we're going to talk about that today. By the way, Dad, if you're listening and this is the first time you've ever heard our show, welcome aboard.
Welcome.
You happen to have come in like rounding third base on a series. You like how I brought in the baseball metaphor
nice.
there, Lawson?
Good job.
Not that you know much about baseball, because guys, go back and listen an episode or two ago, and Lawson made some comment about baseball, which is like me talking about brain surgery. The minute I open my mouth, you're going to know he clearly has never done a brain surgery. But you are rounding third base, gentlemen, on a series that we're doing on the podcast based from our most recent book that we published called Don't Bench Yourself. And the idea is sometimes we're in the game of life and something goes wrong and we want to just walk off the field and stop doing important things like being a dad or being a husband. So we bench ourselves, or that's where we are now. We're sitting on the bench of life and we don't know how to get back in the game. So if you want to get back in the game or stay in the game, this series was made for you, as is the book. And along those lines, before we dive in too deeply, you can snag the book on Amazon. Go grab it if you want a copy or two. If you want several, like if you lead a men's ministry or you're a pastor or a CEO and you want to give 5 or 10 or 500 to your staff, come to us at manhoodjourney.org, and you can buy the books in bulk and save a ton of money off of the retail price. Thanks so much, by the way, to our friends at Range Leather. Today's show is brought to you by Range Leather. That's rangeleather.com. They have amazing products. This show is coming out not too long before Christmas. You still have time to go to rangeleather.com and save 15% on your next order by using the code MJ15. That stands for Manhood Journey 15, 15% off your next order. Use the code MJ15 at rangeleather.com. Lawson, make it right. What do you think about when we start talking about doubling back and making things right as a dad or a husband?
Well, first of all, I'm going to rangeleather.com after the show because I need a new wallet.
There we go.
Kyle and them hooked me up for a corporate event that we had and sent us all kind of good stuff. And dude, it was such a hit. Range Leather, Kyle, we love you. So last week we talked about call it out. So something happens in our life, and instead of blowing right by it, moving on, trying to, skate away from it without really owning what happened, we talked about going ahead and naming it and calling it out and recognizing and realizing and bringing whoever it was also in that loop, into our sight so that they see that we see it. And we said that needs to happen as quickly as you can, as close to the event as is possible. So in other words, the closer to the moment is better versus having to come back I don't know, weeks or months later and revisit something when people's memories have faded a little bit, or that
Right.
that moment is gone, Likewise, I think for making it right, I think about, here's how I think about this. Not baseball, because I know I'll mess that up. But think about an injury. Think about a baseball injury. There we go.
Won't you describe what's the potential baseball injury like?
Right.
Well,
right.
when your skis fall off and you're like, okay, no, it has nothing to do with baseball.
No, like think about a broken limb.
Yeah.
You can call it out. You can say, I just broke my arm. But if you don't then take the next step and make it right, time does not do any good. Time makes it worse. In fact, I had a friend who was going on a Christmas vacation, and literally the day before, a golf cart rolled over his foot.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it wasn't so bad. It wasn't like it crushed it. A golf cart's only so heavy, but it hit it right, and it was like, it was early enough in the day, and it kept getting worse as the game went on. So he was like, man, I'm gonna hit the urgent care as we go. And so we went there and actually had a decent experience, and the doctor was good. And he was like, but look, I'm going on vacation in the morning, and I think I'm okay. I think, and they did an x-ray and it came back and there were several little fractures in there. Yeesh. And the doctor was like, it might heal, or it might be that what's going to happen is you're going to get back from vacation. You're going to have put this off. Ooh. And then we're going to have to re-break it and make
like
it
with
right.
A golf cart again? Like again with the golf
right,
cart?
Yeah, right. We're going to have to go get your golf cart, and we're going to use a car this time. No, it was like, it's not going to heal correctly. And so we may have to break it and make it right, and put it in a cast and do the right thing. Or we can do that right now. It won't take long. I get it. You're going to go on your vacation with a boot, but so what? It's better than waiting.
Wow.
And I think in the terms of healing, if you've done something in your life, us as a dad, we can make a wound in a kid real easy. Sometimes without really knowing it, without really, like maybe our words carried more weight than we realized in the time or in the moment rather. And so call it out, realize you've done it, bring them back into it and say, look, here's what happened, and then make it right.
Yeah.
Right negates regret. And what I mean by that is if you don't, you get down the road and you come back from vacation with a foot that's now worse, and you go, I wish I had done it sooner. So making it right can negate that regret.
That's a great line. Right negates regret. As is my custom, I will give you credit for that line, and then once I'll use it, and then I'm going to say, some guy said once.
Okay,
and I'll give you
right. That's what I do. That's what I seek to do with you. It's hard to find those nuggets, but every now and then when you...
Then later, I'm going to say, as I've always said, like I will eventually, I'm just going to inch you out of this equation.
Right. It goes from my buddy Lawson said to I once heard this one guy say, and then, you know what? Here's what I always say.
And I can't get away with it right now. I mean, the podcast is live. Someone heard you say it 2 minutes ago. So... But you know what? They don't listen that close. They'll forget by the next episode. I'm going to bring this up next week. So, right negates regret.
Well, let me double down on that. 2 Corinthians 7.
Oh, you're just trying to take more credit for it. I got you. Yeah.
Well,
hey, screw it down.
I'm actually giving credit where it's due. I didn't say this.
As Kent said in his book.
It was said in the Bible. Yeah, right. No, not in that book. In the other book, the bigger book, the most important book. 2 Corinthians 7 verse 10 says, "For godly grief produces a repentance that leads to salvation without regret."
Yes.
And dude, that just really hit home for me in the context of you call it out. That's one part. That's the first step. Second is make it right.
Yeah.
And something in there I want you to double down on too is godly grief produces a repentance. That's different than just, I wish I hadn't have said that. Like if it's in your heart and God is speaking into your heart and bringing you grief over something you've done, that's a different level that you really need to hone in on.
Well, and some of these topics we're talking about, Lawson, are super obvious how they tend to work. In other words, you screamed at your kid and then the next day you feel guilty and then there's this tension and it's pretty obvious, pretty palpable. Or you did what I've done before. You reacted in your anger and like physically damaged something like your car or a wall or something. And it's like the next day, no one can debate whether it happened. And the fact that you got out of the game of life in a way, you benched yourself, is really obvious. But this one that you're hinting at, the godly sorrow, the godly repentance, if we don't go make those right, they're really slippery slopes and we find ourselves benched in the game of life, but we can't quite tie it back to what happened. So for example, what I mean is these little daily moments, whether you were unkind to somebody or you were prideful or greedy or lustful or whatever the issue was du jour, and you don't make that right fairly quickly, they take an aggregate weight. It's like the opposite of compound interest. You know, it's like compound sin degradation over time. But then you find yourself benched and go, golly, how did I get here? I'm not even sure I know how I found myself in this spot. Well, it was a series of small things that you could have easily made right, but then they became a big thing because you didn't make any of them right. And you hinted at something earlier about time does not tend to fix this. That phrase, there are certain phrases that we could do a whole podcast series on stupid phrases we say that are unwise and unbiblical and aren't even totally true, right? And one of them is like Alex put it in the notes, time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Like that is not biblical. That's crazy. Now, I guess in theory, eternity heals it all because Jesus comes back. Okay, but that's not what we mean when we say that. We think 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 years will heal these wounds, and they won't. They'll go underground and be embedded in your children's hearts. If you were an uncaring, unloving, unlistening dad, your kids are going to learn that's who you are, and they're going to stop sharing things with you. And just because y'all don't fight anymore doesn't mean that time healed all those wounds. It just means they've learned you're not going to listen anyway, so why talk to him? And so, yeah, there's no fighting, but there's no love either. So this is so important for us as men and as fathers to take the initiative. I would love to tell a quick story, Lawson, about a time when one of my kids did something and then made it right. April and I were afforded an opportunity several years ago to go to Israel on a 10-day study tour, completely free, paid for by a church that we were affiliated with, and they were taking a big team over there, and this was like a gift to us as missionaries. And so when we left,
it was just you two.
Just the two of us. And
Yeah.
and we were with 40 other people, but yeah, not my whole family.
Right. But it wasn't the whole family. Yeah.
No, it was a 10-day Israel date that April and I went on. It was fantastic. And as such, we had young kids still in the home, and they all needed to be watched. And so there was this like almost like military invasion level schedule of who's got which kid, what night, who they're handing them off to, phone numbers, contacts, the whole bit, right? April had to go into like ultra plan mode and make sure our kids were cared for while we were gone. So 10 days abroad is a long time, especially with young kids. So while we're in Israel, we decide, man, we need to get all those people, 7 or 8 of our relatives and friends, some really cool gifts from Israel as a way of thanking them. So we went to this one store. They had these hand-carved olive wood. I mean, allegedly, who knows? Maybe these are all, made in Bangladesh or something. But they said they were hand-carved olive wood nativities from the Holy Land. I mean, come on. What is better than that? So we pick out, I'm sitting there carrying stuff. April picks out the right, like 8 or 9 or 10 of these for those people. And every person she had in mind, like, oh, so-and-so will love this one because, Mary's head is tilted just like her. And I'm like, whatever. So I'll carry stuff. So April had picked out person by person. Then, as you can imagine, I think it was 8. And they're all about as big as this football. Getting 8 of these back to America, undamaged, was no small feat. We're grabbing stuff out of the waste bin at the hotel, like for paper wrapping, and we're asking other people for, do you have any bubble wrap? So what's the Hebrew word for bubble wrap? We don't know. So we're trying to get these back to America. undamaged. Shockingly, we do. We get them home, we look at them real quick, and we're like, no way, this is great. And this is like early November. So we're going to give them to them as Christmas gifts. And we have them in this big bag, and they're sitting in our basement, and they're ready to be wrapped with our Christmas wrapping. And April goes down, around Thanksgiving, first week of Christmas, and just starts to just do Christmas wrapping for weeks. And she's amazing at it, does gifts all the time. So she goes downstairs, and I'm standing 10 feet from where this happened. And she says, hey, where are they? So weird. I don't see them. So she looks around, can't find them. And she goes to our son, Jonathan, who at the time was probably about 14 or so, maybe 15. And his job, among many, was to take out the garbage in our home every week. And she goes to Jonathan without 1 ounce of suspicion, just says, hey, Jonathan, where is that big bag that was sitting in the basement? And he said, like, it was in a white bag? She said, yeah. And he said, the one that was sitting next to the thing we use for the garbage? And she goes, yeah, that's the one. He goes, I threw that into the garbage. So Lawson, April and I have been married at the time about 25 years, 24 years. I think it's the only time in our entire marriage where she got her keys, she pulled out of the driveway, and none of us knew where she was going or how long she was going to be gone or whether she was ever going to return. She was incensed. She was so angry because she thought, yeah, Jonathan had his earbuds on, paying no attention, acting like a stupid teenager. And so he just threw stuff out all willy-nilly. Where Jonathan thought it was a large white bag that looked like some trash sitting eerily close to the trash container. So they had a divergent view on how this all went down.
Yeah, he's like, I went over and above.
Bro, exactly. I took out garbage 2 times. I should be like, big blessing. So all that happens. She comes home and there's this, conversation that looks like a WWF fight regarding what happened. So we go a couple days with fairly high amount of tension in our home. And I can't tell you.
Yeah, like how do you replace? You can't.
Yeah, and it's almost Christmas. It's like mid-November. Bro. So my son, Jonathan, comes to me and he says something like, this is really close to accurate. He says, Dad, listen, I really don't think I did anything wrong, but I do understand I was the one who threw these in the garbage. So how can I make it right? And I thought, that is impressive.
Dude, good for him.
Would you believe, of all the things I happen to have in my wallet from our trip to Israel was one business card for a guy named Zach who ran the shop that we bought those olive wood things at. No joke. And it's got his cell number on it. So I'm like, no way. So I text this number. Hey, Zach, we were there just a few weeks ago. Any chance we could... So we start back and forth. About 3 days later, I go to Jonathan and I say, hey, good news and bad news. And he said, all right, what's the bad news? And I said, about $250. That's the bad news. And he said, oh my gosh, what's the good news? And I said, Zach can get us 8 new nativities back here before Christmas. And I go, but he's going to cut us a deal on the actual nativities. And however, we got to pay like $100 in shipping to get them over the pond in time. And Jonathan did not hesitate. He just goes, tell Zach to get him here. I'll cover it. And I was like, no way. Oh my gosh. I'm so proud of him. Now, there may be some details of this story. My wife listens to the podcast almost every week at the YMCA. She's probably jumping off of her elliptical right now, trying to track me down and go, that's not how it went down. I'm sure I missed some details. However, it's one of the more fun stories in our family lore now, the Evans family legend that's currently being unfolded about how to make something right, especially when what went wrong was not done out of malice or ill intent. Like it's one thing to go, steal something from somebody and then repay them for that and cut their grass because you did it and you were wrong and you were immoral when you did it. It's another thing to have something go wrong and you're going to take responsibility even though you weren't maliciously trying to harm someone. Man, that's like next level making it right. And I was so proud of him, still am. And I think the story, even though it's a long story, I think it goes to help dads understand that there are going to be times when we do things that we are just willfully sinful, selfish, wrong, and we do things and we've got to make some of those things right. There are going to be some things we do that just went wrong, even though we were trying to do right. And some of those we still have to make right, even though we didn't mean to do wrong.
How old Jonathan now?
20.
And he remembers this, not just because...
Are you kidding?
Right.
Oh my goodness. We have a plaque over our door that says, "Abandon all hope. Ye who enter here and throw away a white garbage bag without asking." No, I mean, bro, absolutely. No one around here forgets this.
It's interesting. You know, he comes to you and in the book, you said, "Okay, Dad, I know I didn't purposely ditch those gifts. I don't even think I was being reckless, but I also realized I was the one who threw them in the garbage." And what I wrote in the margin was, even when, what if we aren't in the wrong? Like, what if he truly, you know, like it was, she had inadvertently put it in the actual trash bin, not beside it. And he was just the one, he had no fault, no real responsibility. Okay. There are things in our life that maybe we're blamed for and we did not have a hand in it, or we did, but our intention was true and really, really right, but it actually wound up hurting that person.
Yeah.
And we inadvertently, maybe we didn't even notice it. There's times like when that comes up, you know, and like I was saying before, especially we dads, we can wound a kid pretty easily without really realizing it. You know, we're grown men, we've got thick skin, we aren't thinking about it, we're in a hurry. You offhandedly say something to your little girl, and it damaged her, it wounds her.
Yeah,
It hits the mark, you know, and you didn't even realize it. And then other times you truly are innocent. You had hardly nothing to do with it. And we get pulled into the circle of blame. And my question is, does it hurt or help when we accept responsibility for maybe even more than we actually own? And I think it helps. You know, can we maybe, in his case, did Jonathan dig his heels in and fight back? Well, his mom was really upset, and he cares about his mom, and so he wanted to make it right. And he, you know, "Hey, Dad, what can I do to make this right?"
Hey, Dad, do you ever feel tempted to pull yourself out of the game of life and just warm the bench? To sit it out while your family steps in and picks up the slack? I know what it's like to want to ride the bench and withdraw. This can be the easy path to take, but we know it's not the best one. So, the engineers at Father on Purpose Laboratories have created a revolutionary new product, the Game Time Helmet. You put it on and it relentlessly screams in your ears, "Hey, pal, keep your head in the ball game." It comes in an array of colors and even has an adjustable chin strap to lock it on tight. I use one every day. I've even started letting my teenage kids wear it. It only has one volume setting, blaring. Now, we're joking. Sorry. This product doesn't really exist. However, what does exist is the new book, Don't Bench Yourself by Kent Evans. It's a short read packed with powerful lessons, and as a bonus, it does not incessantly yell at you. Snag a copy of Don't Bench Yourself and get back in the game today.
But there's also times where you may want to make it right, but that person's gone. You know, they're no longer with us, or something happened, and for whatever reason, you feel like just too much time has passed. You know, you kind of the memory of it is even kind of foggy. Can you still make it right? Can we still take responsibility for something that we ought to own or that we partially own? You know, we can seek to repair damage that was done. We can apologize. We can change our behavior and then admit it and talk about it, you know, and there's more to change in your behavior than saying, "I'm going to change my behavior." it's got to be proven, what's
right.
the saying? Actions are more than words, something along those lines. And so what I really appreciate about Jonathan was that he didn't fully, I don't think, in the telling of the story the way you say it. April's probably got a totally different version.
Careful, Lawson. Careful. I mean, just tread carefully.
Yeah, I know. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there are times where Jonathan, he didn't mean to do that. He didn't go, ooh, I know what I'm going to do.
He definitely did not see it and go, you know what?
I'm going to ruin this Christmas on purpose.
Right. Definitely did not do that.
Now, that's a totally different thing altogether. My point is, how much does it hurt us to try to make something right, even though we didn't have, a full hand in it, or too much time has passed, and do you really need to? Do you really need to go dredging up the past just to ask for forgiveness and say you're sorry? Maybe you have changed your behavior, and it's been so long ago that the person, you go to them and try to make it right, and they go, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that since then. You changed for the better, and got that because of that you have adjusted the way you handle things, and I love you for that, and there's no need to apologize in either way. Did it take anything from you to do that, to go and go maybe even take a step or two overboard to make something right? I say it does not. I think why take the chance?
Right.
When you can, there's another saying about, the high road is rarely a wrong way. And
is that a saying?
Think that's right.
Did you just make that up? I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Well, I wrote it in my margins here, so it's a saying.
then it's a saying.
And
Look,
I said it. The high road is rarely wrong way.
I heard a guy say one time. Oh,
I actually did just say that, yes. So
you did
the high road is rarely a wrong way. And I believe that, what if it's not fully yours to own? Own it. Go for it. It's going to make them feel better, and God's going to honor that.
One of the things that you and I talk about often on this show, why are you laughing? I was trying to be serious. One of the things you and I talk about often on the show is the model for a man is not some other man. It's Jesus Christ. And so, I want to be like you in how accommodating you are, how friendly you are, how helpful you are. There are pieces of Lawson Brown I would love to have mapped into my character. As the wise walks with the wise, so he becomes like, I'd love for parts of Lawson Brown to rub off on me, parts of other people. Like, I'm an amalgamation of a lot of the men who've poured into me over the years. Having said that, there's no man who's the ultimate man, right? Even though, certain guys might pitch themselves as the ultimate this or that. But there was one. That's Jesus Christ. As my friend Dan Spader said, Jesus was man as man was intended to be. Man, what a great line. That's such a great line. And for us, think about the verse in Romans 5. God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So back to the question you asked a minute ago, how do we go and make things right even when our intentions were good? There will be those times when, with the best of intentions, things go wrong, and you still may need to own up to something. Well, our model for that is Jesus himself, because Jesus didn't owe us an explanation. He didn't owe us a saving death on the cross. He didn't owe us a 3-year flawless ministry. He didn't come down to, quote unquote, make things right because he made them wrong. Ooh, we made them wrong.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he still came down to make them right. He stepped in. Every now and then, at some point in my boys' development, I would tell them my favorite definition of the word mature or maturity, because you talk about that, especially if they're going through puberty or things like that. We talk about topics like maturity. If you look up the word mature in the dictionary, you'll see things like fully developed or full grown. Or one that I love says, having reached the most advanced stage in a process. Having reached the most advanced stage in a process. So this idea of being mature has has these suggestions that you're moving through a process and you've gotten to the end, you've gotten to the top of a process. Those are all fine definitions. I like the definition. I don't remember where I heard it. It's not an original thought. You probably said it on an old podcast and I'm now taking credit for it. Maturity is acceptance of responsibility. Even responsibility I didn't have to own. So, for example, if you've said something that offended somebody, now, I mean, we live in a trigger-happy culture, and everybody gets offended by the slightest things, so you can't control all of this. However, with your wife and your kids especially, you want to keep really short accounts. So you might say something to your daughter that for you is an innocent question, but it comes out like, are you really going to wear that to church? Mm-hmm. And what you meant to say was like, it's a little cold outside today. You might need a sweater, or maybe you meant something different, but you said it in a way where she took it as she looks ugly, right, or she looks immodest, or you're challenging or angry with her. Or you say, to your son, is that the best you can do? And you, what you mean is, like, I think you can do better. Let's try harder. But what he heard was, you're a failure and you're just not ever going to amount to much. So then at some point, within reason, right? But at some point, we're going to want to step in and own how our messages are received, not just our intention in how they're delivered. I didn't mean to offend you. Well, too bad. You still offended me. And maybe I got a problem with my easy to be offended nature. Okay, let's talk about that. But I love to see mature men who step into roles where they say, you know what, I'm going to own this problem, even though I didn't cause it. And we see this a lot. An easy way for guys to relate to this is in the area of like a sports team. You got the coach who comes in, and the last 2 years, the team was really terrible. That's why the old coach got fired. And so you're the new guy. Well, what do you got to own? The current level of talent, the current playbook. There's like, you didn't recruit most of these players, but you're going to step in and you're going to win or attempt to win with the hand you've been dealt. And then over time, sure, you're going to try to stack the deck with better cards, but you're going to probably have to win with somebody else's hand early, or you won't last 2 or 3 years either. And so it's easy to see that in like a coaching context, because we're all used to seeing this in the sports world. Guy takes over a down team, and then all of a sudden they're on the uprise. And then before you know it, he gets poached by the best team in the league, because if you can turn that thing around, you can do anything. So we see that, but we fail to apply it as husbands or fathers. And we've got to learn to make things right, even when we didn't make those things wrong.
Yeah. And let me try to boil something down. Making it right is to me a deeply heartfelt apology after calling it out for what it is. And we talked about a blunt acknowledgement before, making it crystal clear. There's no ambiguity. There's no ambiguity. Like, you're not mincing your words.
Yeah.
So own it completely and apologize deeply. Maybe even go overboard. In the show notes here, we've got the story about Zacchaeus, who was at the time back then a tax collector and somewhat crooked. I think he took advantage of people, right?
Yeah.
And was curious about Jesus to the point that he followed him. And because he was, the huge crowd, he climbs up in a tree, and then the crowd is like blown away that Jesus wants to spend time with him. I'm reading between the lines, but they hate this guy and despise who he is and what he stands for. But his heart became broken the closer he got to Jesus. And then in verse 8, Luke 19, 1 through 10 tells the story. In Luke 8, it says, "And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, 'Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold.'" And Jesus goes on to say, "Today salvation has come to this house." And what I take from that is, when he says he's going to restore it fourfold, it's that he's taking responsibility, but he's also kind of going over and above. Yeah. And I think there's a lesson in that for us dads that says, we're here to set an example. We are forgiven ourselves. of many mistakes, many wrongdoings, many bad thoughts that no one sees, or habits that we hide. And we're forgiven. We're forgiven so completely. Like you said, Jesus, he came down to make it right, even though he had nothing to do with making it wrong, you know? And I think that's a huge lesson. So like Zacchaeus goes over and above, he restores it fourfold. It takes nothing of us to apologize. It's weird, you know, sometimes saying I love you is hard, and sometimes saying I'm sorry is hard. But it takes practice. They both take practice. And when our kids see us doing that, they can then replicate it themselves within the family, within their friendships. You know, it goes on to help them have healthy, restorative friendships and relationships, because they understand that even if it's not fully theirs to own, man, it just makes the other person really feel so much better and appreciate it. And I think feel the love of God, because sometimes that has to come from him through us to others.
Yeah.
And you know, that way he is honored and glorified, not us going, ha,
Yeah.
you know, I won that argument. I faked an apology and now they think I'm great, you know, like,
Yeah.
no, like mean it, man. Like Zacchaeus, he's broken. He was broken. He's ready to give it all away. And it was because he got close to Jesus and felt that love for others and saw them through the lens that Jesus was walking around this earth, looking at everyone through, you know, his pure love.
I was talking with a guy who leads a men's ministry, actually right before we recorded today's podcast. And we got on the topic, Lawson, of identity and character and all the stuff about, you know, who we are in Christ and what we really believe, what's really, really true about us. The metaphor I've used lately is, because I came out with a new book, right? I'll ask people, the new book is called Don't Bench Yourself. And who got to say what the title of that book was? Ken Evans did. Why? Because I wrote it. I'm the creator of that book. As such, I get to label it. I get to label it and say what it's called, because I'm the creator. And frankly, other than some guys I did invite in on that process, nobody else gets to really decide that. I do. And the truth of the matter is, the reason we struggle to apologize and make things right actually goes back to our identity. Because we're concerned that if I apologize, I'm going to admit something about myself that, guess what? Everybody already knows. Like, you're not telling us something we don't already know. You're flawed. I'm flawed. You're selfish. I'm selfish. You're prideful. I'm prideful. That's life, man. And once we realize that the capacity to err, to make mistakes, is part of the deal, then the ability to apologize for those mistakes is no longer a big problem. It's not my identity.
Right on.
It's a mistake that I made. And I want to own up to it, because my identity is I'm a child of God, and there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. I'm not condemned even because of my failures. I live in grace, not under the law. And so once we realize that we're letting our distorted view of our identity, because we've let other people speak into our life and tell us who we are, other than our creator, who should be the only one who gets to tell us who we are, then we struggle with things like apologizing or making it right.
It's a great thought.
Because it's all connected to our identity, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We can move past that sort of stuff, which is, by the way, the most seamless segue ever, because that's what we're going to talk about next week. Thank you. We're going to talk about, we're on this 4-step process, right? We talked about fear, shame, criticism, and impatience, and the things that can cause us to bench ourselves. And then now we're in part 2 of the second half of the book, that is, call it out, make it right. And then next week, we're going to talk about leave it behind. We're going to talk about what do you do after you've made it right, or if you're in a situation where you can no longer make it right, because to your point, you said earlier, Lawson, maybe the person with whom you need to make it right has passed away or is too far away, or you can't contact them. So there are some times when making it right isn't an easy option for you. We're going to have to leave some stuff behind, and we're going to dive into that next week on the Father on Purpose podcast. We'll see you then. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in.
We're sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week. I like it when Lawson starts giving me the throat cut, and I'm like, okay, how can I land the plane within 2 minutes?